The millionaire had never heard a maid talk back, and shockingly, his mother wanted her as a wife. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Before we start, drop a comment telling us what city or country you're watching from. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. The crystal chandeliers threw diamonds of light across the ballroom as the Blackwell family's 50th anniversary gala reached its peak. At the center of the room, Aidan Blackwell, immaculate in a tailored black suit, jaw set in granite, was delivering a toast about the future of the empire. It should have been perfect, until a sharp crash broke the air. A full glass of Merlot bled across the head table's pristine white cloth. The conversations died mid-sentence. Cameras from the press snapped toward the sound. Aidan's eyes cut toward the source, a young maid in a simple black uniform, frozen mid-step, a silver tray trembling in her hands. Unbelievable. His voice carried across the hushed room, low but laced with steel. You can't even walk straight? Elena kept her gaze on the spill, not on him. Her fingers curled tightly around the tray's edge. Someone in the crowd gave a muffled laugh. Another whispered, "New girl won't last a week. Get it cleaned. Now," Aidan said, already turning back toward his glass. But then, her voice calm, level, cut through the clinking silverware. "It wasn't me. The table leg is loose." The air shifted. It was the kind of sentence no one had ever dared to throw back at Aidan Blackwell. His head turned slowly, disbelief sharpening his features. "What did you just say?" "The table leg," Elena repeated, crouching to press one hand against the carved mahogany. "It's been unstable all evening. This spill would have happened to anyone." Aidan took a step toward her, shadow falling over her bent figure. "You're blaming the furniture now?" Elena stood, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm pointing out a fact. If you want it to happen again, by all means, ignore it." A ripple of whispers moved through the guests, like wind through dry leaves. Someone gasped. Even the string quartet faltered on their violins. Aidan's jaw flexed. The muscles in his temple ticked once, twice. No one had ever spoken to him like that in public. He opened his mouth to deliver a retort, but before he could, another voice joined in. "Aidan." It was Margaret Blackwell, matriarch of the family, her pearls glinting under the chandeliers as she approached. Her eyes swept over Elena, then to the uneven table leg, and back again. "She's right," Margaret said simply. "And I like her." The corner of Aidan's mouth tightened. "This is hardly the place." Margaret cut him off with a single raised hand. "I think we should talk later, in private, about her." Elena blinked, unsure if she'd just been rescued or marked for execution. The room's attention stayed fixed on the three of them, the tension thick enough to taste. 30 minutes earlier, Elena had been in the service corridor, tying her hair back and adjusting the hem of her second-hand uniform. The other staff barely noticed her, just another pair of hands in a black dress. She had taken the job 2 weeks ago. Rent was due. Her younger brother's textbooks weren't going to pay for themselves. And the Blackwell Hotel's gala meant triple overtime. She didn't expect to be anywhere near the spotlight. She didn't expect the CEO himself to notice her existence. And she certainly didn't expect to stand toe-to-toe with him in the middle of a ballroom. Back in the present, Aidan's eyes held hers for a long, cold beat. Then he stepped back, pulling a monogrammed handkerchief from his pocket and dropping it on the spill without a word. Elena bent to pick it up, but Margaret's voice stopped her. "Leave it. My son can manage without your labor for one evening." Gasps fluttered again through the guests. Aidan's lips pressed into a thinner line. Margaret turned to Elena, her smile warm but measured. "What's your name?" "Elena Reyes, ma'am." "Oh, good, Elena. I'd like to see you tomorrow afternoon. My office." For the briefest second, Elena saw Aidan's composure crack just enough for surprise to flicker there. The quartet resumed their music. Conversations hesitated, then picked up again. But at the Blackwell head table, a new game had begun, one no one else could quite name yet. In the staff room after midnight, Elena hung her uniform in the narrow locker, listening to the hum of the vending machine. Her hands still carried the ghost of the wine glass, the tremor she'd forced herself to still. She didn't regret speaking up. Not exactly. But she knew what men like Aidan Blackwell could do with a grudge. The locker room door creaked open. It was Mrs. Doyle, the head housekeeper, eyes wide. "Margaret Blackwell wants to see you tomorrow," she said, voice somewhere between awe and terror. Elena tried to smile. "She already told me." Mrs. Doyle shook her head slowly. "No, you don't understand. When Margaret wants someone, she gets them. And she just told half the board she's found the perfect match for her son." Elena froze, her fingers still on the locker's metal handle. "That's ridiculous," she said. Mrs. Doyle only shrugged. "You'll see." The next afternoon, Elena stood outside the double doors of Margaret Blackwell's private study, the scent of roses and old books drifting under the carved panels. Somewhere inside, the woman who ruled the Blackwell empire was waiting. And somewhere else in the building, Aidan Blackwell was asking himself why the maid who dared talk back to him was suddenly the only person his mother seemed interested in. The door opened. "Elena," Margaret's voice called, rich and smooth. "Come in. We have possibilities to discuss." Elena stepped over the threshold, not realizing she had just walked straight into the center of the Blackwell family's most personal power game. Margaret's study smelled faintly of roses and leather-bound books. Sunlight spilled in through tall windows, catching on the gold leaf of an old Blackwell family portrait. Elena stood just inside the door, hands clasped loosely in front of her, willing herself not to shift her weight from one foot to the other. Margaret gestured toward an armchair upholstered in pale blue silk. "Sit, dear." Elena obeyed, the cushion sinking beneath her, feeling absurdly soft for someone in a maid's uniform. Margaret poured tea from a porcelain pot, every movement slow, deliberate. "I don't often involve myself in my son's social life," she began, "but last night you showed something I haven't seen in years." Elena's brow furrowed. "I just told the truth." Margaret's lips curved. "Exactly." From the corner, a low voice intruded. "I wasn't aware we were recruiting for honesty awards." Aidan stood in the doorway, one hand in his pocket, the other still on the handle. His gaze landed on Elena, unreadable, before moving to his mother. "Good, you're here," Margaret said, unbothered. "This concerns you." Aidan stepped inside, closing the door with a muted click. "If this is about last night, it's about the future," Margaret cut in. She set her teacup down with a quiet clink. "I want Elena to work directly with you. No more kitchen duty. She'll shadow you for the next quarter." Elena blinked. "With respect, Mrs. Blackwell, I don't think you'll be compensated appropriately," Margaret interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. Aidan's eyes narrowed. "You can't just drop someone into my schedule like that." Margaret's gaze sharpened. "I can, and I will." The silence stretched, heavy. Elena could feel the unspoken battle between them, a duel fought with nothing but controlled breaths and calculated pauses. Finally, Aidan looked at Elena. "Do you even know what that would entail?" She met his stare. "Probably more criticism than I'm ready for." Something flickered in his eyes, the faintest glint of surprise before his expression shuddered again. The next morning, Elena arrived at the Blackwell headquarters downtown. Glass towers glinted under the late morning sun, their mirrored surfaces reflecting the city's relentless motion. She'd borrowed her cousin's blazer, one size too big, and tied her hair back in a sleek bun. The uniform was gone, but the feeling of being out of place clung like a shadow. Inside the marble lobby, the receptionist's gaze swept over her. "Deliveries go through the service entrance." I'm not here for deliveries." Elena adjusted the strap of her modest leather bag. "I'm here to see Mr. Blackwell." The receptionist's eyebrows lifted, just slightly, before she tapped her headset. "Mr. Blackwell, there's a visitor for you." Aidan's voice crackled faintly through the earpiece. "She's expected, send her up." 32nd floor. The elevator doors slid open to a minimalist office space where every surface gleamed. At the far end, Aidan was on the phone, his back to her, voice low but clipped. Without turning, he gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "Sit." Elena crossed the room, heels muffled against the thick carpet, and took her seat. Aidan ended his call, finally looking at her. "You'll be assisting with the Aurora project. It's a hospitality venture in Miami. You'll sit in on meetings, take notes, and fetch coffee?" she asked, arching one eyebrow. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost into a smile. "If that's the part you excel at, yes." She let it pass. "What's the real reason I'm here, Mr. Blackwell?" "Because it's not my resume." His gaze held hers for a beat too long. "That's none of your concern." By noon, she was seated in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. The Miami team was on a video call, charts and projections flashing on the big screen. Halfway through a discussion on cost overruns, one executive mentioned a supplier's clause that would guarantee price stability. Elena's pen stilled. "That's not what it says," she murmured. The table fell quiet. Aiden's head turned sharply. "Excuse me?" She glanced at the contract on the screen. The clause states price stability only applies if purchase volume stays above a threshold that the current projections don't meet, which means we'd be exposed to a 20% price hike. Aiden finished, his eyes narrowing. One of the executives frowned. "Who told her she could speak?" Aiden didn't look away from Elena. "She's right. Adjust the projections and rerun the numbers." After the meeting, Aiden caught up to her in the hallway. "Where did you learn to read contracts like that?" "I didn't," Elena replied. "I just pay attention." He studied her for a long moment, the noise of the office fading behind them. "My mother seems to think you belong here. I'm not convinced. Yet. Then I guess I'll have to prove it," she said, walking past him toward the elevator. Aiden watched her go, a faint crease forming between his brows. That evening, Margaret called her son into her private dining room. Over silver candlesticks and untouched plates, she said, "I like her for you, Aiden." He set down his glass. "This isn't about me." "It is," Margaret replied, eyes cool. "You've built walls so high no one bothers to climb them." She didn't just climb, she walked right in. Aiden leaned back, jaw tight. "This is business." Margaret's smile was slow. "Perhaps. For now." The next day, a memo went out across the Miami project team. All queries to be reviewed by Elena Reyes before submission to Aiden Blackwell. By afternoon, her inbox overflowed. And somewhere between legal clauses and supplier calls, Aiden realized she wasn't just surviving in his world, she was starting to change it. He didn't like that realization. Not one bit. Still, when the last meeting of the day ended, he found himself saying, "Walk with me." Elena hesitated at the doorway. "Where?" "You'll see." She followed him toward the private elevator, the city lights beginning to spark beyond the glass walls. Neither of them knew that by the time the doors opened again, they'd be stepping into a situation neither contracts nor social rules could control. The private elevator hummed softly as it descended, its mirrored walls reflecting Aiden's composed silhouette and Elena's wary posture. Neither spoke at first. The quiet was thick, broken only by the gentle mechanical sigh of each passing floor. Finally, Elena crossed her arms. "Are you going to tell me where we're going, or is this part of your mysterious billionaire routine?" Aiden's eyes shifted to hers in the reflection. "Downtown. There's someone you need to meet." Her brow furrowed. "Another meeting? After 10 hours of meetings?" "Not exactly." His tone carried no explanation. The elevator opened to the building's underground garage. A black town car waited, engine purring. The driver sprang out to open the door. Elena hesitated. "Is this business?" "It's personal," Aiden said simply, gesturing her inside. The ride was quiet, the city sliding past in flashes of neon and late-evening traffic. Elena kept her gaze on the blurred lights outside. "You're not exactly a people person, Mr. Blackwell. Why the sudden interest in introducing me to anyone?" "Because my mother asked me to," he admitted, a trace of irritation in his voice. "And because I'm curious." "Curious about what?" "How someone who cleans hotel rooms can spot a legal loophole in 30 seconds. She smirked faintly. "Guess you'll have to keep me around to find out." 20 minutes later, the car stopped in front of an unassuming brick building on a quiet side street. Inside, the scent of fresh bread and cinnamon wrapped around them. A small bakery, warm and golden under soft lights. Behind the counter stood a man in his 60s, apron dusted with flour, a smile forming as soon as he saw Aiden. "Mr. Blackwell," the man greeted, wiping his hands on a towel. "It's been a while." Aiden inclined his head. "This is Elena Reyes. Elena, this is Robert Callahan. He's an old family friend." Robert's handshake was firm, his eyes bright with curiosity. "So you're the young lady Margaret's been talking about?" Elena blinked. "She's been talking about me?" Robert chuckled. "Let's just say she doesn't usually mention her son's colleagues unless she sees something special." Over steaming mugs of coffee and slices of warm bread, Robert shared stories about the Blackwell family stories Aiden clearly hadn't planned to hear again. Margaret's early days building the hotel empire, her strict standards, her uncanny ability to read people. She believes you're honest, Robert said, looking at Elena, and she values that more than anything, even more than loyalty. Elena set her cup down carefully. That's flattering, but I'm just doing my job. Oh, Robert's smile was knowing. That's what makes it so rare. Back in the car, the air between them was different, quieter, but not strained. Why bring me there? Elena asked finally. So you'd understand my mother better, Aiden said. And maybe why she's dangerous when she sets her mind on something. Dangerous? Elena echoed. She gets what she wants, he said simply, his gaze fixed on the city lights. Always. The next morning, Elena arrived at the office to find her desk already stacked with files for the Miami project. But on top of the pile sat a cream-colored envelope. Inside, a formal invitation, embossed with the Blackwell crest. Private dinner, Blackwell Estate. Her stomach tightened. There was no sender's note, but she didn't need one. That evening, she stood in front of the estate's massive oak doors. A butler opened them to reveal the grand dining room, all glittering crystal and polished silver. Margaret sat at the head of the table, serene as a queen. Aiden was already there, expression guarded. Sit, Elena, Margaret said warmly. Tonight is about family. Elena took the seat opposite Aiden, feeling the weight of Margaret's gaze like sunlight through glass warm, but potentially blinding. Dinner began with polite conversation, mostly Margaret asking Elena about her upbringing, her studies, her brother. Elena answered carefully, aware of Aiden's silent scrutiny. Halfway through the main course, Margaret set down her fork and folded her hands. I've been thinking, she said, voice carrying easily in the high-ceilinged room. You and my son work well together. Perhaps you'd work well in other capacities. Elena froze, her fork halfway to her plate. Aiden's head snapped toward his mother. Mother, Margaret ignored him. You have backbone, Elena, and that's exactly what this family needs. Elena swallowed. I appreciate the compliment, Mrs. Blackwell, but Margaret leaned forward slightly, her smile calm. It's not a compliment, it's an observation and a proposal. The room seemed to shrink. Aiden's voice was low, sharp. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious, Margaret replied. Elena looked between them, heat rising in her face. This is absurd. I'm your employee. Margaret's eyes softened. For now, silence fell like a curtain, broken only by the faint ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Finally, Aiden pushed back his chair. Dinner's over. Margaret didn't stop him. She only looked at Elena and said, Think about it, dear. The right match can change everything. Later that night, Elena sat in her small apartment, the invitation still on her counter. She replayed every word, every glance from the dinner. Aiden's annoyance, Margaret's certainty, and the unsettling thought that maybe, just maybe, Margaret's intentions weren't entirely about marriage. At the Blackwell estate, Margaret sipped her tea alone in the study, a faint smile on her lips. Robert Callahan's voice echoed in her mind. She's rare, Margaret whispered to herself. And she'll be ours. The next morning, Elena walked into the office to find Aiden waiting by her desk. We need to talk, he said, his tone unreadable. She set down her bag. About the project? His gaze didn't waver. About my mother, and about you. The elevator chimed in the distance, but neither of them moved. Whatever came next, Elena knew this was no longer just about contracts or corporate politics. She'd stepped into the heart of the Blackwell family's most private game, and walking away might no longer be an option. The office was unusually quiet for mid-morning. Phones still rang in the background, keyboards still clicked, but in the space between Aiden and Elena, there was only the hum of tension. We need to talk, Aiden repeated, his voice low enough to keep curious ears from catching more than the words themselves. Elena set her bag on the desk. About your mother? And about you, he said, glancing toward the glass wall of his office. Inside. Oh. She followed him in, the soft click of the door sealing them away from the outside noise. Aiden didn't sit. He leaned against the edge of his desk, arms crossed, watching her with the same focus he used in negotiations. My mother doesn't make casual suggestions. If she's talking about marriage... She's joking, Elena cut in. She's not, he replied flatly. She's decided you're worth her time, which means she'll push, hard. Elena let out a sharp breath. So tell her it's not happening. Problem solved. He shook his head. That's not how she works. The more you resist, the more she'll want it. Elena folded her arms. Then what do you want from me? To quit? His jaw tightened. Number, you're useful on the project. But you need to be careful. She's not just my mother, she's the most dangerous player in this family's empire. For a moment, Elena said nothing. She walked to the window, looking down at the grid of streets far below. I've dealt with worse, she said quietly. Worse than Margaret Blackwell? Her lips pressed together. You'd be surprised. Something in her tone made him straighten. What does that mean? But Elena shook her head. Not important. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, supplier calls, and adjustments to the Miami projections. Still, Aiden kept catching himself, glancing at her, trying to fit the sharp, unflinching maid from the gala into the woman sitting across from him now, annotating contracts like she'd been born to it. That evening, as Elena packed her bag, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something, maybe instinct, made her swipe to answer. Elena Reyes? A male voice, deep and unfamiliar. Yes? You don't know me, but you know the Blackwells, and if you want to keep your job, you'll stay away from them, especially their son. The line went dead before she could speak. The next morning, she arrived early, only to find a small padded envelope on her desk. Inside, a single photograph. Her, years younger, standing beside a man in a dark suit outside a courthouse. On the back, one word, written in block letters, remember. She stuffed the photo back into the envelope just as Aiden walked in. You're early, he noted. Couldn't sleep, she said, forcing a light tone. He studied her for a moment, but didn't press. We've got a site visit in Miami next week. You'll be on the plane. That afternoon, Margaret appeared at the office unannounced. Darling, she said to Aiden, I thought we could all have lunch together, get to know each other better. Elena hesitated, but Margaret's hand was already warm on her arm, steering her toward the elevator. The restaurant was one of those discreet, high-end places where the tablecloths were heavy and the waiters moved like shadows. Margaret ordered for all three of them without asking. Between courses, she spoke as if Elena wasn't there. Aiden, you've been far too focused on work. It's time you considered stability. Aiden's fork paused midair. Mother, Margaret sipped her wine. Elena understands the importance of family. Don't you, dear? Elena met her gaze evenly. I understand its value and its cost. Margaret's smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. Costs are negotiable, in the right hands. Back at the office, Aiden caught Elena before she could leave. What did she say to you? Elena's bag strap slid off her shoulder. Enough to know she's not joking. He exhaled through his nose. I'll handle her. She shook her head. Number, you won't. Because if you push back, she'll dig in. And I'm not interested in being anyone's prize in a family chess match. That night, alone in her apartment, Elena pulled the photograph from the envelope again. Her younger self stared back, standing in front of that courthouse, her hand clenched at her side. The man beside her, she hadn't thought about him in years. She remembered the trial, the whispers, the way her family had been torn apart by a case that never made the news, but had destroyed everything anyway. And now, somehow, the Blackwells were in the orbit of that old wound. The next morning, as she entered the lobby, Robert Callahan was waiting by the reception desk. We need to talk, he said, steering her toward the cafe across the street. Over coffee, his voice was low. I don't know what you were involved in years ago, but someone is stirring it up. If Margaret finds out before you tell her yourself, Elena's chest tightened. She'll use it. Robert nodded. And so will her enemies. Back at the office, Aiden's assistant handed Elena a file. Inside were the final contracts for Miami, and tucked between them, a note in Aiden's handwriting. We're flying down early, just you and me. Need to talk without an audience. Elena folded the note, sliding it into her bag. She wasn't sure if she was walking into a strategy session or a trap. That evening, Margaret sat in her study, a manila folder open in front of her. Inside, the same courthouse photograph, a newspaper clipping, and a single-page report. Her manicured finger tapped the image of Elena's younger face. Interesting, she murmured. Outside the study door, someone listened and quietly dialed a number. In the city below, Elena walked home under the fading light, unaware that the past she'd buried was already making its way to the surface. And when it did, It wouldn't just threaten her job. It would force Aidan Blackwell to decide whether she was a liability or the only person he could trust. The hum of the private jet was steady, almost hypnotic, as it sliced through the clouds toward Miami. Elena sat by the window, watching the sunlight scatter over the ocean far below, but her mind wasn't on the view. Aidan sat across the aisle, laptop open, eyes fixed on spreadsheets. He hadn't said much since they boarded, and the silence felt heavier than the jet itself. Finally, she broke it. "You said we needed to talk without an audience. So, talk." Aidan looked up, shutting the laptop with deliberate calm. "I've had my head of security looking into that phone call you got, the one you didn't tell me about." Her pulse quickened. "How do you know about that?" "Because whoever it was didn't just call you. They called the Blackwell office, too." She gripped the armrest. "What do they want?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," he said. "But I think it has something to do with your past." Elena's gaze slid to the window. "My past isn't your business." He leaned forward slightly. "If it threatens my family, it is." Her chest tightened. "You mean your company?" His eyes didn't flinch. "Same thing." The jet touched down under a brilliant Miami sun. As they stepped onto the tarmac, the humid air wrapped around them, thick with salt and possibility. A black SUV was waiting. Inside, the driver handed Aidan a sealed envelope. He didn't open it right away. Only after they were halfway to the hotel did he break the wax seal. Inside were 3 photographs, the same courthouse picture Elena had found on her desk, plus 2 more. One showed her talking to a man in an alley. The other was grainy but clear enough. The same man, in handcuffs, being led into a police van. "Who is he?" Aidan asked, his tone calm but cutting. Elena stared at the photos. "His name was Daniel Cortez. He knew my family." "Family? How?" She swallowed hard. "He was my father's business partner. Until he wasn't. There was a fraud investigation. He went to prison. My father didn't survive the scandal. And you?" "I was 18. Testified against him. Spent years trying to rebuild. It didn't matter, people remembered the name Reyes for all the wrong reasons." They arrived at the hotel, a sleek, oceanfront property that would soon carry the Blackwell brand. Aidan handed the photos to his assistant with a curt, "Lock these in the secure file." To Elena, he said, "Stay close today. I don't want you out of my sight." "Is that an order?" "Yes." The site visit began with a tour of the unfinished suites. Contractors in hard hats moved between rooms, the sound of drills and hammers echoing off marble floors. In the penthouse, Aidan briefed the Miami team on deadlines and budgets. Elena took notes, but her mind kept drifting to Daniel Cortez, to the warning call, to Margaret's too-sharp smile. At lunch, they dined with local investors. One of them, a silver-haired man named Victor Salazar, seemed particularly interested in Elena. "You're not what I expected from the Blackwell inner circle," he said with a half-smile. "I'm not part of the inner circle," she replied evenly. "Not yet," he said, glancing at Aidan. "But Margaret, she has plans." Aidan's jaw tightened. "We're here to discuss the project, Victor. Let's stick to that." That evening, back in her hotel room, Elena found a note slipped under her door. "Meet me on the pool deck at midnight. R.C." She knew the initials instantly. Robert Callahan. The pool deck was quiet under the moonlight, the water shimmering in shades of silver and blue. Robert was already there, leaning on the railing. "You shouldn't have come," Elena said. "And you shouldn't be here," he countered. "Margaret's digging into your past. She's days away from finding everything." "I'm not hiding anything illegal." "That's not the point," Robert said. "If she thinks you're a liability, she'll cut you out. And if she thinks you're leverage, she'll use you against Aidan." A shadow moved across the deck. Aidan stepped out from behind a column, his expression unreadable. "I figured you'd meet her," he said to Robert. "I just didn't think you'd be stupid enough to do it on my property." Robert straightened. "She needs to know what's coming." Aidan's gaze flicked to Elena. "She does. And now I do too." Back in her room, Elena barely slept. When dawn broke, she was already on the balcony, watching the waves crash against the shore. Aidan knocked once before stepping inside. "Pack your things. We're leaving early." "Why?" "Because someone in this city just offered to buy you." Her breath caught. "What?" "Victor Salazar. He told me outright he'd back the project if you were part of the deal. And my mother already knew he'd make that offer. They were on the jet within the hour." Somewhere over the Atlantic coast, Aiden finally spoke. "You're not going to work on the Miami project anymore." Her stomach dropped. "So you're firing me?" "Number, I'm keeping you close, closer than before. Because I think my mother's plans for you have nothing to do with marriage and everything to do with control." Elena stared out the window, the clouds rolling beneath them. "And you? What do you want?" Aiden didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "To find out why she thinks you're worth controlling." The jet engines roared on, but neither of them spoke again. Both knew that whatever game Margaret Blackwell was playing, they were already deep in it, and the next move might come sooner than they were ready for. The jet touched down in New York just past noon. Rain streaked the windows as the city skyline slid into view, gray and sharp against the clouds. Elena followed Aiden down the steps, the damp air clinging to her skin. Neither of them had said much since Miami, but the silence was less about comfort and more about calculation, like two chess players eyeing the same dangerous piece. At the car, Aiden's driver handed him a phone. "It's Mrs. Blackwell, sir. She says it's urgent." Aiden took it, jaw tightening. "What is it, mother?" Margaret's voice was smooth, but there was steel beneath it. "We need to meet, tonight, at the estate." "I'm busy." "You'll make time," she said and hung up. By the time they reached Blackwell Tower, Elena was already sifting through emails at her desk. She could feel eyes on her, the sideways glances of employees who had clearly read the same gossip that was now spreading like wildfire. Aiden appeared in her doorway. "We're going to the estate after work." "Why?" "Because if we don't, my mother will come here, and you don't want that." The Blackwell estate was all golden light against the rain-dark night when they arrived. Margaret was waiting in the drawing room, a glass of red wine in her hand. "Elena, dear," she greeted warmly, gesturing toward the sofa. "Come, sit. We have much to discuss." Aiden didn't sit. "Say what you need to say." Margaret's eyes glinted. "Victor Salazar made me an offer, a generous one, but I declined, for now." Elena's stomach twisted. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want you to understand the value you bring to this family," Margaret said, "and the price others are willing to pay for it." Aiden stepped forward, his tone sharp. "She's not for sale." Margaret didn't look at him. "Everything is for sale, Aiden. The question is only how and when." Elena rose from the sofa. "If this is about me marrying your son," Margaret's smile didn't waver. "It's not about marriage. It's about influence. You have it, and you don't even know it." The storm outside lashed against the windows as the three of them stood in that room, the air charged. Finally, Margaret set down her glass. "I'm hosting a charity gala next week. You'll attend, Elena. On my arm." Aiden's head snapped toward her. "Absolutely not." Margaret's voice cooled. It wasn't a request. The next week moved fast. By Friday, the Blackwell name was on every invitation in the city, and Elena found herself in a dress Margaret had arranged midnight blue, cut to perfection, and expensive enough to make her uneasy. In the limo to the gala, Aiden sat beside her, silent until the car slowed. "She's setting you up," he said quietly. "I know. Then why go through with it?" Her gaze stayed on the glowing building ahead, because walking away won't stop her. "And maybe I'm tired of running." The gala was a blur of chandeliers, champagne, and whispered speculation. Margaret moved through the crowd like a queen among courtiers, Elena at her side. At the far end of the room, Victor Salazar watched them, his smile slow and deliberate. Margaret leaned into Elena. "When you stand next to me, people see strength. They'll start associating that with you. Use it." Elena glanced at her. "And what do you get out of it?" Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Exactly what I want." Halfway through the evening, a reporter cornered them near the grand staircase. "Miss Reyes," he said, voice eager, "how does it feel to be the woman everyone's saying has captured both the CEO's and his mother's favor?" Elena froze, the room seeming to tilt for a second. Before she could answer, Aiden appeared, hand firm at her back. "She's here because she's earned it," he said evenly. "And that's all you need to write." Later, on the balcony overlooking the city, Elena finally exhaled. Aiden joined her, the sound of the party muffled behind them. "She won't stop," he said. "I know." "Then we make a deal," he said. "You don't let her push you, and I don't let her sell you. We keep this, whatever this is, on our terms." Elena met his gaze. "And if she finds a way to force us?" His expression hardened. Then, we force back. Inside, Margaret watched them from across the room. Her glass raised just enough to hide her smile. In her mind, the game was still hers to win. And neither of them realized that she'd already set her next move in motion, one that would bring Elena's past crashing into the present before either of them could stop it. 2 days after the gala, the city buzzed with talk of the Blackwells, not because of a deal or a merger, but because of her. Elena could feel it in the way strangers looked twice when she passed. The way whispers started and stopped in elevators. By Monday morning, the unease in the Blackwell Tower was a living thing. Aiden was waiting in her office when she arrived. He didn't bother with good morning. My mother's called a press conference for tomorrow. Elena set down her coffee slowly. About what? She says it's for the new foundation initiative, but the guest list is stacked with media she usually avoids. Elena's brows drew together. You think she's planning something? I know she is. His jaw tightened. And if she brings up your past on live television? I can handle it, Elena cut in. No, you can't, he said, sharper than intended. Because this isn't about truth, it's about perception. And once she shapes it, you'll never get it back. That night, Elena sat at her kitchen table, the courthouse photo lying between her hands. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. You've got 24 hours before the truth is everywhere, the voice said. Might want to tell your billionaire before his mother does. The line went dead. The next morning, the press conference was already a spectacle by the time they arrived at the Grand Hall. Cameras, lights, a stage dressed in Blackwell gold. Margaret was radiant at the podium, her voice smooth as silk as she spoke about charity, transparency, and the power of integrity. Elena stood at the side, just out of the spotlight, Aiden beside her like a silent sentinel. Then Margaret's tone shifted. Integrity, she said, is something I value not only in business, but in the people I choose to stand beside me. Her eyes swept the crowd and landed purposefully on Elena, which is why I want to share a story. Elena's heart thudded. Aiden stepped forward, but Margaret raised one hand. This young woman, Margaret continued, comes from a background that is, not without controversy. The murmurs began instantly. She stood in a courtroom at 18, facing down corruption that could have destroyed her community. She told the truth, even when it meant losing everything. The room was silent now. Every camera lens seemed pointed at Elena. She is proof, Margaret said, that your past does not define you, your choices do. And it is my honor to welcome her, not just into this company, but into my trust. Applause broke out. Aiden's eyes narrowed, his mind already running through the angles. This wasn't an attack, it was a claim. After the press conference, in the green room, Elena faced Margaret. You had no right. Margaret smiled faintly. I gave you legitimacy, publicly. Now no one can touch you without going through me. That's not protection, Elena said. That's ownership. Margaret's gaze was calm. Call it whatever you like. It works. In the car, back to the tower, Aiden finally spoke. She's locked you in. You know that, right? Elena stared out the window. Maybe, but she also underestimated me. Aiden glanced at her. What are you planning? She didn't answer, but the faint curve of her lips was the first sign of fight he'd seen all day. That night, Elena met Robert Callahan in a dimly lit cafe. She made her move, Elena said. Robert nodded grimly. Which means it's your turn. But you need leverage. The kind even Margaret won't risk ignoring. And you know where I can get it? Robert leaned in. Let's just say, the Blackwells have a few skeletons of their own. Back at the estate, Margaret stood by the window, the city lights glittering beyond. On the phone, her voice was low. Yes, she took the bait. Keep watching her. The moment she steps out of line, I want to know. She ended the call, her reflection in the glass, smiling back at her. In her apartment across town, Elena spread out the old documents Robert had slipped her under the table. Names, dates, transactions. If they were real, they could shift the balance of power in a heartbeat. And for the first time, she thought maybe she wasn't the one trapped in Margaret's game. Maybe Margaret was trapped in hers. By the next morning, the folder Robert had given Elena was hidden inside her tote bag like a live wire. She'd hardly slept, not because she doubted the documents, but because she knew exactly what they meant. If she used them, there was no going back. The Blackwell Tower lobby was busier than usual, the kind of hum that meant a big announcement was coming. When she stepped out of the elevator onto the executive floor, she saw it immediately, a notice on the glass board. Emergency board meeting noon. Aiden appeared in his doorway, tie already loosened. "You got the memo?" "Yeah," Elena said. "What's it about?" He shook his head. "Mother didn't tell me." "Which means it's not good." Her hand tightened around the strap of her tote. "Maybe it's time we make it her problem." Noon came fast. The boardroom was a long stretch of glass and steel, the skyline spread out like a painting beyond the windows. Margaret sat at the head of the table, immaculate in charcoal gray. Aiden took his seat at her right. Elena was supposed to stay outside, but she didn't. The moment the meeting started, Margaret launched into it. "There's been concern," she said, "about certain vulnerabilities in our brand image. As such, I've prepared a restructuring plan." A murmur went through the room. "In this plan," she continued, "some positions will be reassigned, effective immediately." Her gaze flicked to Aiden, then to the empty seat beside him, the one Elena now occupied. "Before we talk about restructuring," Elena said, her voice steady, "I think the board deserves to see something." She pulled the folder from her tote and slid it onto the table. "This is a record of offshore transactions from 12 years ago, shell companies tied to the Blackwell Foundation." The air in the room seemed to thin. "Those accounts," Elena went on, "were dissolved just before a federal audit. No taxes were paid on the transfers. And the signatures authorizing them are right here." Margaret's expression didn't change, but her fingers curled slightly against the arm of her chair. "Where did you get that?" "From someone who remembers what loyalty used to mean," Elena said. The board members leaned forward, scanning the documents. Whispers rose, fast and sharp. Aiden looked from his mother to Elena. "Is it true?" Margaret's voice was calm, but low. "Every company protects itself." "By breaking the law?" one of the older board members asked. "By doing what's necessary," she said. Elena didn't flinch. "The thing about necessary, Mrs. Blackwell, is that the definition depends on who's holding the power. And right now, it's not you." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the chairman of the board cleared his throat. "We'll need to review this. Privately." Margaret's eyes never left Elena's. "You've made a dangerous mistake." "Or a smart one," Elena replied. The meeting broke. Margaret swept from the room without a word to Aiden. He stayed seated, staring at Elena. "You just declared war." She stood, tucking the empty folder back into her tote. "Number, I just stopped letting her fight on my terms." That night, the city was restless with rain. Elena walked home without an umbrella, the water soaking her hair, her dress, her skin, but not cooling the fire under her ribs. Because for the first time since stepping into the Blackwell world, she wasn't reacting. She was moving first. Across town, Margaret stood in her study, the city lights fractured in the glass behind her. On the phone, her voice was low and sharp. "She thinks she's won. Remind her how quickly I can take everything away." In the penthouse above Blackwell Tower, Aiden poured himself a drink but didn't touch it. He knew what his mother was capable of. And now, Elena Reyes was in the center of that storm by choice. The question wasn't whether Margaret would hit back. It was whether Elena would still be standing when she did. The morning after the board meeting, Elena stepped into the office and instantly felt the shift. Conversation stopped when she passed. Eyes followed her, not with curiosity this time, but with the sharpness of people waiting for a fall. By the time she reached her desk, her inbox was flooded. Some were routine project updates. Others weren't. The subject line on one froze her in place. "For your eyes, only Rhea's family." She clicked. The email was from an anonymous address, containing a single attachment. A scanned newspaper clipping from 10 years ago, a local headline about the Cortez fraud trial. Her name was highlighted in yellow in the witness list. And below that, in red letters, "This is who the Blackwells trust?" Before she could process, Aiden appeared in her doorway. "My office, now." Inside, he shut the door. "They're coming for you." "I noticed," she said, dropping into the chair. "Anonymous email, conveniently timed. Let me guess, your mother?" "She's not subtle when she's angry," Aiden admitted. "But this is more than just her." Someone's feeding the story to outside press. Elena rubbed her temples. So what's the play? You lie low. No public appearances, no press, no giving her more ammunition. She looked up sharply. You want me to disappear? I want you to survive, he said. By noon, the first gossip site had posted the clipping. By 2, a business blog had dug deeper, pulling old court transcripts, spinning the narrative that Elena Reyes was a liability to the Blackwell image. By 5, 3 major outlets had picked it up. And then came the message, not an email, but a hand-delivered envelope, left on her desk without a name. Inside, a photograph of her younger brother, Miguel, walking out of his job at a garage. On the back, in neat handwriting, we can reach him, too. Her stomach turned cold. She dialed his number immediately. Hey, Lena. Miguel's voice was casual, unaware. Everything okay? Yeah, she lied quickly. Just checking in. You haven't talked to anyone weird lately, right? Number why? No reason. Love you. Talk later. She hung up, her pulse hammering. That night, she called Robert. They went after Miguel, she said. He cursed under his breath. That's Margaret. She won't touch you directly right now, too public. But your family? Fair game. So what do I do? You get ahead of her, Robert said. Publicly. Make your past a strength before she turns it into a weapon. The next morning, Aiden found her in the break room, phone in hand. I'm doing a live interview tonight, she told him. His expression darkened. Absolutely not. It's the only way, she said. If I tell my story myself, she can't spin it. I'll take away her leverage. You'll also put a target the size of this building on your back. She met his gaze. It's already there. That evening, the lights of the television studio were hot on her skin. The interviewer leaned forward. Miss Reyes, people are saying you have a controversial past, that you testified in a major fraud case involving your father's business partner. Is that true? Yes, she said plainly. I told the truth then, and I'm telling it now. I lost my father because of that case. I lost my home, but I didn't lose my integrity. Back at the Blackwell estate, Margaret watched from her study, a glass of wine in hand. When the segment ended, she smiled not with defeat, but with calculation. She's good, she murmured. Better than I thought. She set the glass down and picked up her phone. Plan B, she said to the person on the other end. We hit where it hurts most. The following morning, Elena arrived at work to find security blocking her from the elevator. Miss Reyes, one of them said, we've been instructed to escort you to HR. Inside the small conference room, an HR director slid a document across the table. Leave of absence effective immediately. This is Margaret, Elena said flatly. The director didn't meet her eyes. The board voted last night. Officially, it's to avoid distraction during the Miami launch. Unofficially, Elena knew. It was a move to push her out entirely while keeping the Blackwell's hands clean. She walked out of the tower without looking back, the autumn air cutting sharp against her face. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Meet me tonight. I have something that will end this for good. Across the city, Margaret stood in the marble foyer of her estate, speaking quietly to a man in a tailored suit. She'll be gone before week's end, she said. The man nodded. And the brother? Margaret's lips curved slightly. Keep the pressure. She'll choose her family or her pride. Either way, I win. In her apartment, Elena stared at the folded HR letter on her table. She knew Margaret's game now, and she also knew there was no safe way out. If she didn't fight, she'd lose everything. If she did, Miguel would pay the price. And somewhere deep down, she realized maybe Margaret had been right about one thing. In the Blackwell world, everything was for sale. Rain-slicked streets reflected the city lights, as Elena made her way to the quiet bar where Robert had told her to meet him. The place was almost empty, just a bartender polishing glasses and 2 men playing chess in the corner. Robert was in a booth at the back, a worn leather folder in front of him. You came alone? He asked. Yes, she said, sliding into the seat. What is it? He pushed the folder toward her. Proof that Margaret's been moving personal funds through the foundation's accounts the same way she accused her rivals of doing. Dates, transfers, offshore entities. Enough to ruin her reputation and force her off the board. Elena's hands hovered over the folder. If I use this, she'll go for Miguel harder than ever. Not if you make it public in a way she can't fight back, Robert said. You give it to someone she can't touch, and you make yourself look like you've stepped away from the fight. You're telling me to walk away? I'm telling you to look like you're walking away, he corrected. You sacrifice your position to protect your brother. But in doing so, you set off a bomb under her feet. The idea rattled in her head the whole night. By morning, she had made her choice. She called Aiden. Meet me in the cafe across from the tower. 10 minutes. When he arrived, she slid into the booth opposite him. I'm resigning. Today. His eyes narrowed. What happened? Margaret happened, Elena said. She's making Miguel the target. I can't let that happen. Aiden leaned forward. If you walk out now, she wins. Not if I take something with me, she said quietly. But I need you to trust me. His gaze searched hers. This is about more than just leaving, isn't it? She didn't answer, but the faintest hint of a smile tugged at her lips. By noon, she was standing in front of the HR director again. This time, with her resignation letter in hand. This is effective immediately, she said. The director glanced at the paper, relief flickering across her face. I'll notify Mrs. Blackwell. Do that, Elena said, her tone even. 2 hours later, a headline exploded across a major business news site. Blackwell Foundation. Under scrutiny, alleged misuse of funds by Chairwoman Margaret Blackwell. The article was detailed, damning, and sourced from confidential insider documents. Elena read it from a bench in the park, her phone buzzing nonstop with calls she ignored. That evening, she received a single text from Aiden. She's furious, but she can't touch you now. Whatever you did, it worked. At the estate, Margaret paced the length of her study. Find out who leaked it, she ordered. Her aide hesitated. The article says the documents came from multiple sources. Even if we find one, it won't be enough to… I said find out, she snapped. 3 days passed. Miguel called her, confused but safe. Some guy in a suit came to the shop, he said. Asked a few questions, then left. Haven't seen him since. Good, Elena said. Just stay alert. She was pouring herself coffee the next morning when her phone rang. Robert's voice came through, urgent. Margaret's not backing down. She's calling an emergency shareholder meeting to replace Aiden as CEO. She's blaming him for the leak. Elena's chest tightened. When? Tomorrow. That night, she stood outside Blackwell Tower, the rain misting down. Walking away had kept Miguel safe for now, but it had left Aiden exposed. She thought about the first day she'd seen him cold, controlled, untouchable, and how, somewhere between the battles and the stairs, he had started to trust her. Maybe even need her. The decision crystallized in that moment. She wasn't done. Not until Margaret knew exactly what it felt like to lose something she thought she controlled forever. In her apartment, Elena spread out the remaining documents Robert had given her. The ones she hadn't leaked yet. If she played them right, they wouldn't just save Aiden's position, they'd end Margaret's reign entirely. And for the first time since stepping into this world, she wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about victory. The morning of the shareholder meeting broke gray and heavy over Manhattan. From the sidewalk outside Blackwell Tower, camera crews were already staking out positions, sensing a spectacle. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The meeting wasn't scheduled to start for another hour, but board members and shareholders were filing in early, their whispers blending into a low, restless hum. Upstairs, in a private conference room, Aiden adjusted his tie in the glass wall's reflection. Robert stood beside him, scanning the entry list. She's packed the room with her loyalists, Robert said. If the vote goes her way, you're out before lunch. Aiden gave a short nod. And you're sure she doesn't know Elena's here? Robert allowed himself a tight smile. Not yet. In the lobby, Elena stepped through the revolving doors, dressed in a tailored black suit that made her look like she belonged in the boardroom she'd been pushed out of. The receptionist hesitated. Miss Reyes, I'm a shareholder, Elena said smoothly, sliding a folder and an official pass across the counter. And I'm here to exercise my rights. The main boardroom was a theater of power, a long table gleaming under cold lights, rows of chairs filled with investors, advisors, and press in the back. Margaret sat at the head, perfectly composed, her diamond brooch catching the light. She opened the meeting with a voice like polished steel. Today we address the leadership of Blackwell Holdings and its future direction. Elena slipped in quietly, taking a seat in the second row. She waded through the speeches, the financial projections, the carefully worded criticisms of recent instability. Then Margaret made her move. As chairwoman, she said, I recommend a change in CEO leadership to restore stability and investor confidence. I call for a vote to remove Aidan Blackwell from his position, effective immediately. Hands started to raise. The motion was moving fast, exactly as Margaret had planned. Elena stood, her voice cut through the room. Before anyone votes, I believe the shareholders deserve the full picture. Heads turned. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You are not recognized to speak here. Then recognize this, Elena said, holding up a flash drive. Contained here are records of undisclosed financial activities involving the chairwoman activities that, if made public, would jeopardize this company's reputation far more than any headline about me or Aidan. A ripple went through the room. Margaret's tone stayed cool. Baseless accusations from a disgruntled former employee. They're not baseless, Elena cut in, her voice sharp now. These records are corroborated by internal memos, wire transfer receipts, and offshore banking logs, all tied directly to accounts under your control. She glanced at the journalists in the back. And I've prepared copies for the press if needed. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. The chairman of the board cleared his throat. Mrs. Blackwell, is this true? Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Every major company has complex finances. This is being twisted for personal vendettas. But the room had shifted. The whispers were no longer in her favor. Aidan rose from his seat. If there's even a possibility of these allegations, the prudent course isn't to replace leadership, it's to investigate the chairwoman's conduct. A few shareholders nodded. More than a few looked openly at Margaret now, their loyalty visibly wavering. The chairman turned to the board. New motion, effective immediately. Mrs. Blackwell will step back from her duties pending a full internal review. Mr. Blackwell will remain CEO until the investigation concludes. Margaret's fingers tightened on the edge of the table, but she didn't object. She simply looked at Elena, her gaze like a blade. When the meeting adjourned, the room buzzed with reporters firing questions, cameras flashing. Aidan reached Elena in the chaos. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, I did, she replied. Because she was never just coming for me. She was coming for both of us. They stepped into the hallway. Robert was waiting, a satisfied look on his face. That was cleaner than I expected. Elena exhaled slowly. It's not over. She's not the type to retreat quietly. Aidan's jaw tightened. But now she knows you can hit back just as hard. Across the building, in a private elevator, Margaret stood alone, her reflection staring back at her in the mirrored walls. She'd lost the round. But the game? The game wasn't over. As the elevator doors slid shut, her lips curved in a slow, deliberate smile. 2 days after the shareholder meeting, the city had barely stopped buzzing about Margaret's suspension. Headlines painted her as either a shrewd leader under attack or a symbol of unchecked power finally facing consequences. But Elena knew better. Margaret wasn't the kind to lick her wounds. She was the kind to reload. It started with the silence. No calls from reporters. No anonymous threats. Even Miguel's garage hadn't had a single strange visitor since the day of the meeting. By the third day, Aidan voiced what they were both thinking. She's too quiet. They were in his penthouse, the skyline glowing behind him. She's not retreating, Elena said. She's circling. The next morning, Elena's phone buzzed before sunrise. It was Robert. You need to see this. Check the Chronicle's front page. She pulled it up. Her breath caught. Blackwell CEO's secret affair with former MAID exclusive photos inside. Below the headline were grainy telephoto shots, her and Aidan on the balcony after the gala, her stepping out of his car, the two of them at the cafe. She was halfway through the article before she realized the quotes weren't real. Anonymous sources claimed she'd leveraged a romantic relationship to manipulate company decisions. Aidan called seconds later. I'm so sorry, he said. This isn't your fault, she replied automatically, though her stomach was churning. She's framing it to make us both toxic to the board. By mid-morning, the gossip sites were ablaze. Investors were demanding statements. The board called an emergency meeting to address the reputational crisis. Elena sat across from Aidan in the tower's glass-walled conference room. They'll want you to distance yourself from me, she said. I'm not doing that. You might have to, she insisted. For your position, for my position, I need the truth. And for that, I need you here. Robert arrived with a folder under his arm. Margaret's fingerprints are all over this leak. The photographer's a freelancer she's used before for less public work. Can we prove it? Elena asked. Not directly, but if we can get him to talk. She's finished. Aiden finished for him. That night, Elena met the photographer in a dim corner of a riverside bar. He was jumpy, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. I'm not saying anything, he muttered. She pays me well, and she's dangerous. She's already ruined my name, Elena said quietly. How long before she ruins yours? He hesitated, then slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's on there. Dates, payments, instructions. Don't tell her it came from me. Back in her apartment, Elena plugged in the drive. Her screen filled with documents, bank transfers from a shell company tied to Margaret, email threads detailing exactly which shots to get, which angles to make look intimate, and a note. We'll time the release for maximum damage. She sent copies to Robert and Aiden. This is it, she texted, her final card. The next morning, before the board could meet, the city woke to a new headline. Leaked documents tie Margaret Blackwell to defamatory photo scandal. The story was everywhere, news channels, financial bulletins, even morning talk shows. Aiden called her from the tower. She's on the ropes. The board's talking about permanent removal. At the estate, Margaret watched the coverage in silence. Her aide stood nervously by the door. Should I prepare a statement? He asked. Margaret finally spoke, her voice low and even. Number statements are for people playing defense. I'm not done. She turned from the television, her expression unreadable. Call my lawyer. And then, call the one person who still owes me a favor. By evening, Robert was at Elena's door. She's making moves, he said. I don't know what yet, but she's not finished. Be ready. Elena closed the door behind him, leaning against it. Her victory had come faster than she'd expected, but the unease in her gut told her it was too fast, too clean. Margaret Blackwell didn't lose. She recalculated. Across the river, in a penthouse that looked out over the same city lights, Margaret poured herself a drink. On her desk sat a single manila envelope. Inside, a document so sensitive, so explosive, that even she had hesitated to use it. She ran a fingertip over the flap, smiling faintly. Tomorrow, she thought, they'll learn what it really means to have everything to lose. By the time Elena reached the tower the next morning, something felt off. Too many people standing in clusters, whispering. Too many phones out, eyes flicking between screens in her face. Robert met her at the elevator. His expression was tight. She did it. What? He handed her his phone. The headline burned on the screen. Court records reveal Elena Reyes hid key evidence in decade. Old fraud trial. Elena scrolled, her pulse pounding. The article claimed she'd withheld a file that could have cleared a secondary defendant, a file supposedly found in her possession after the trial ended. It painted her as someone who played hero in public while manipulating the case in the shadows. They're saying you perjured yourself, Robert said, and that the DA cut a quiet deal to avoid discrediting the entire case. Her stomach knotted. It's a lie. I know, he said, but she's got what she thinks is proof. Upstairs, Aiden was already pacing his office. This came from Margaret, he said the moment she walked in. The timing, the framing, it's her. She's using forged records, Elena said. She must be. She's also called for a press conference at noon, Aiden added grimly. If she gets in front of cameras with this, the board will fold just to avoid the fallout. Robert leaned against the desk. We've got two options, disprove it before noon, or hit her with something bigger while she's speaking. Elena exhaled. She's already twisting my past into something it's not. If I play defense, I lose. So we go bigger. Aiden frowned. Bigger how? She looked between them. We don't just clear my name. We make it impossible for her to show her face in this city again. At 11:45 a.m., the press room at the Blackwell Tower lobby was packed. Margaret swept in, calm and poised, the manila envelope in her hand. She stepped up to the podium. Today I address troubling revelations about a person who has, until recently, been close to this company. She opened the envelope, sliding the court records into view. Cameras flashed. And then, before she could speak another word, every screen in the room flickered. The Blackwell Holdings logo vanished, replaced by a live feed Elena standing in front of a podium in another room across town. Good afternoon. Elena's voice came clear over the speakers. I understand there are accusations being prepared against me. Before they're made, I want to share the truth and documents proving the real story. She lifted a thick binder. These are authentic, unaltered communications between Margaret Blackwell and multiple parties during the time of that trial, including instructions to suppress evidence, not from me, but from her. She used her influence to protect a guilty man because his company was tied to her investments. The reporters in Margaret's room were already swiveling back and forth between her and the feed. Elena continued, her tone steady but cutting. I've submitted these to the state attorney's office this morning. By now, they've already confirmed the authenticity, which means any claim you hear today from Mrs. Blackwell is a lie meant to distract from her own involvement. She paused, letting the words settle. I've lived with my past openly. Can she say the same? In the tower's press room, the silence was suffocating. Margaret's smile had frozen, her hand still resting on the podium. A reporter finally broke it. Mrs. Blackwell, do you have a response to these allegations? Margaret set the envelope down slowly. No comment at this time. The questions came in a rapid-fire volley, but she was already stepping away, her aides rushing to close ranks around her. By the time Elena ended her feed, Robert was grinning like a man who just watched a checkmate. You didn't just block her move. You ended the game. Aiden's voice came through her earpiece. She's walking out. No answers. No fight. I've never seen her do that. That's because she's calculating her next one, Elena replied. She's not done. But now, she's bleeding. That night, the city's media was split-screen chaos, half playing clips of Elena's statement, half replaying Margaret's silent retreat. In the quiet of her apartment, Elena poured herself a glass of water, staring out at the skyline. She knew the war wasn't over. But for the first time, she felt like she was fighting from higher ground. Across the river, Margaret sat in her darkened study, a single lamp illuminating the desk. Her phone buzzed with a new message. We need to meet. I have something that will bury her for good. Margaret's lips curved into the faintest smile. She typed back one word. When? 3 days had passed since the press conference. Elena had expected Margaret to surface quickly, claws out. Instead, the silence returned heavier, thicker than before. Robert called it the eye of the storm. Oak. Elena called it exactly what it was, the setup. On the fourth night, Aiden's phone buzzed with a message that made his brow crease. He handed it to her without a word. It was a photo grainy, taken from a distance. Elena's brother Miguel, sitting in a diner booth across from a man she recognized instantly. Her stomach dropped. No, it's not possible. The man in the photo was Victor Sandoval, her father's former business partner, the one who'd gone to prison after the fraud trial, the one she'd testified against. What the hell is he doing with Miguel? Aiden asked. Elena's mind was already racing. If Victor's out, and he's with Miguel, this isn't coincidence. Margaret brought him in. Robert confirmed it the next morning. Sandoval was released 2 months ago. Kept a low profile until now. Sources say he met with Margaret's aide last week. And now he's sitting with my brother, Elena said flatly. Robert didn't sugarcoat it. Margaret's found someone with a grudge and he's got every reason to help her. That afternoon, Miguel called. His voice was uncertain. Lena, I met someone who says he can help with work, maybe even help me start my own shop. He said he knew Dad. Elena's grip on the phone tightened. Miguel, listen to me. You stay away from him. Why? He's been nothing but nice. Because he's dangerous, she cut in. And because he's not offering you a job, he's offering me a noose. By evening, her fears were confirmed. A headline hit the gossip wires. Fraud convict claims Elena Reyes, lead under oath, and her family benefited financially. The article quoted Victor directly, claiming she'd hidden funds from the fraud case and used them to support Miguel through the years. It was a lie, but it was a lie Margaret could spin. Aiden stormed into her apartment. They're setting up a narrative. Victor says you kept stolen money. Margaret says you used your position at Blackwell to launder it. If people believe that. I'm done, Elena finished for him. And maybe facing charges myself. Robert joined them, dropping a flash drive on the table. We have one advantage. Victor's not careful. He's been using the same burner phone to contact Margaret's people. If we can get his call logs. They planned through the night. The goal wasn't just to clear her, it was to show the alliance between Margaret and Victor for what it was. By dawn, Elena was ready to move. She met Victor at a coffee shop near the docks, a place where the air smelled of salt and rust. He smirked when she sat down. "I was wondering when you'd call. I'm here to tell you to leave Miguel out of this," she said. "You think you're in a position to demand anything?" Victor leaned in, his voice low. "You ruined me. Margaret's giving me a chance to ruin you back. I'd be a fool to turn that down." She studied him for a long moment. Then she slid a small recorder onto the table. "Thanks for confirming that on tape." His eyes widened just enough to tell her he hadn't expected that. She stood, walking out before he could grab it. Back in Robert's office, they downloaded the audio. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Victor naming Margaret, describing their deal. Aiden looked at her across the desk. "If we release this, it's war. Real war." Elena's voice was steady. "It's already war. We're just finally hitting back." That night, Margaret sat in her study, watching a news anchor introduce an exclusive leak. Victor Sandoval's own voice, playing over footage of his diner meeting with Miguel. The anchor's tone was sharp. "This raises serious questions about the lengths Mrs. Blackwell will go to discredit her opponents and whether she's been coordinating with known criminals." Margaret's glass of wine sat untouched. She turned to her aide. "Get me Sandoval." When the aide hesitated, she added, "Tell him I have one last job for him, and it's worth every risk." Across town, Elena stared at her phone. A message had just come through from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but by the time I'm done, you'll wish you never stepped into our world." No signature. None needed. It started before sunrise. The pounding on Elena's apartment door was loud enough to rattle the frame. She pulled it open to find two men in dark suits, not Aiden's security, not Robert. "Federal agents." "Elena Reyes?" the taller one asked. "We have a warrant to search the premises." Her pulse spiked. "On what grounds?" The agent handed her a document. "Allegations of possession of stolen financial assets connected to the Cortez Sandoval fraud case." Within minutes, her living room was swarming with agents. Boxes were pulled from closets, drawers emptied, her laptop bag unzipped. She stood in the middle of it, forcing herself not to shake. This wasn't random. This was Margaret and Victor's last card, and it was meant to look official. By the time they left, her apartment looked like a burglary scene. No charges yet, but that didn't matter. The story broke within the hour. Former MAID turned executive. Under federal investigation sources, cite decade, old fraud links. Margaret didn't even have to speak. The headlines were doing her work for her. Aiden found her in Robert's office later that morning. "They're trying to isolate you," he said, his voice tight. "Make you radioactive so even I can't be seen defending you." "They're not trying," Elena corrected. "They're succeeding. The board called. They want you to issue a statement cutting ties with me." Robert looked between them. "They think this is checkmate." She leaned forward. "Then we don't just prove it's false, we prove they fabricated the whole thing." "That means getting inside Victor's operation," Robert said. "Not easy. He doesn't keep records anywhere obvious." Aiden's eyes darkened. "Then we go to the one place he thinks is untouchable." That night, the three of them drove to a grimy auto shop on the edge of the docks, Victor's supposed business since his release. The front was locked, but the side door gave under Robert's pick set. Inside, the smell of oil and metal was thick. They found it in the office, a battered file cabinet in the corner. Folders crammed with bank slips, payment logs, and one labeled MB. Elena pulled it open. Inside were not just payments from Margaret to Victor, but detailed instructions including the setup for the federal raid. "This is it," she whispered. "This is how we end them." Robert was already snapping photos with his phone. "We can take this straight to the prosecutor. It's enough to clear you and bury them both." But as they turned to leave, headlights flooded the shop floor. A black SUV screeched to a stop, doors flying open. Victor stepped out, flanked by two men. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction, "if it isn't the girl who thought she could outplay us." Aiden moved in front of Elena. "You've made enough mistakes for one lifetime, Victor." Victor's grin widened. "Funny, I was about to say the same to you." The standoff lasted seconds before Robert shoved a heavy wrench into Aiden's hand. "Go," Robert said to Elena. "Get this to the car." She sprinted through the side door, clutching the folder, the sound of shouting and crashing metal echoing behind her. By the time she reached the street, tires squealed Robert's sedan, skidding to a stop beside her. "Get in." They tore away from the docks. Elena's hands still locked on the evidence like it was her lifeline. Back at Robert's apartment, they spread the files across the table. Every page was a nail in Margaret's and Victor's coffins. Aidan arrived an hour later. A shallow cut on his cheek, but otherwise unhurt. "Victor's done," he said. "Cops showed up. Someone must have called." Robert smirked. "Maybe someone anonymous tipped them off, with a certain audio recording from our diner meeting." By dawn, the files were in the hands of the prosecutor's office. By noon, news outlets were running with the real story. Evidence links Margaret Blackwell and Victor Sandoval in criminal conspiracy against former employee. Margaret was photographed leaving her estate, head down, flanked by attorneys. Victor was seen being led into federal custody in handcuffs. And Elena? She stood on her balcony, watching the city wake up, the weight she'd carried for a decade finally starting to lift. Her phone buzzed. Aidan's message was short. "It's over, for now." She typed back. "Then let's see what we can build without their shadow hanging over us." Across the city, in a holding cell, Margaret sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes were calm, almost patient, because for someone like her, over was never the end.